Welcome, boys and girls, Christine here with a discussion about the Tomb Kings in Total War Warhammer 3. Creative Assembly is going to do Nagash in roughly 6-7 months, and it is going to contain Tomb King content. They've been very clear on that. But the Tomb Kings themselves need a proper racial rework. Not what we were handed by Creative Assembly earlier this year. For the record, yes, the update was limited. They made it very clear on that, but it was also the things they didn't do they could have done with respect to it. So it is one of those dynamics where CA could have improved things further and made the Tomb Kings better, but because the people who made the update clearly don't necessarily play Warhammer 3 all that much, they missed the mark from my perspective. One of the things I would say about the Tomb Kings is that the legendary lords that they have don't really have unique mechanics. So that's one of the things they should improve on. So when you're looking at Cetra, when you're looking at Archon, when you're looking at Khalida or poor Katep, who has one of the worst campaigns in the game at the moment, they do desperately need something unique. As opposed to the current situation where it kind of feels similar in every campaign in the sense that your long campaign objectives are always, or for the most part, going to be the same. Take over Nehekara, beat up some factions, and then take territory in Nehekara, and crucially build these pyramids. And that is something I believe should be improved. Another thing to mention on this is that while they did add the ability for you to confederate to a limited level, legendary lord factions, either through beating them up in battle or through the mortuary cult. The mortuary cult one is ridiculous. 50k gold just to get Khalida with one province? No, thank you very much. That's ridiculous. It's not a great system. Could have been done better. So, as an example. Especially because Khalida might end up being wiped out in this campaign, or even if she doesn't get wiped out, she's just gonna give you 1 or 2 provinces. That is not a worthwhile fucking confederation considering the cost. It's one thing for Karl Franz to spend 2,500 prestige, but 50k gold. I mean, there's a lot I can do, and to be quite frank, it might be just better worth destroying Khalida, or selling, or getting a border with her, selling all your territory to her for infinite money, and then doing that. Is one of those really big missed opportunities because, again, the developers just don't play their own game, don't understand it all that well from that perspective. See, guaranteed confederations can really make a campaign far more interesting. It does for the dwarves, it does for the Empire with Karl Franz, but not like this. Like, when you look at the dwarves, it's go do stuff, and then you can confederate all of these legendary lords. All of them, without exception. And you can't confederate minor factions, by the way, through diplomacy as the Tomb Kings, which is like, okay, great. That's fantastic. Especially the faction that's over here in the Cracked Land, because even if you ally them or vassalize them and wipe out Volkmar, you can't just give them territory. No, because then you need the pyramids that they have. And speaking about the pyramids, these pyramids are supposed to give you various benefits, right? But they're worthless. The reason is not that the pyramids themselves don't give worthwhile benefits. Some of them do, some of them don't. Like 100, 200 unit experience per armies and province from the Great Pyramid of Cetra, as well as 2 unit capacity for Tomb Guards and Tomb Guard Halberd. So that's 4, basically. That's worth it. But others, just not so much. And really, it's a 10-turn construction time for many of these structures, and not all of these are going to be worth it all that much. I mean, Glorious Charge for Skeletal Chariots, okay, sounds fucking good. Except it's not, but yeah, it is that level, that dynamic that we constantly see playing out. Some of these things are good, but all of them cost population surplus. And a lot of money, too. I mean, yes, the Pyramid of King Katep, the Pyramid of Cetra, those are worth it to some extent, especially construction time, but others just are very, very sketchy, and it's the combination of construction costs, tiers, surplus points that make them very questionable, right? In the end, they prove worth it, but by the time you even get them, it's like, GG, well played, that's cute. you don't care about them anymore. So the way they should handle these pyramids, maybe a unique faction mechanic with them, where you're choosing which one to build and in which order and separate. Look at Pharaoh, how that did it. That was a better system because you had a specific location that was unrelated to your settlements that allowed you to go do that. So that was a much better system than what we ended up getting. On top of that, the fact that you have a faction or a race that has limited armies, you only start with your initial one, and everything else has to be unlocked, either for research, which takes 10 turns by default, unless you have some research benefit, or through the mortuary cult. Now, they have scaled up the mortuary cult, gain of canopic jars. So, for instance, if I, just go beat up the dwarves over here, for instance, using this as an example, I have 970, I just auto-resolve, I get 91. It would even be more in a field battle, but we don't have that. So anyway, point is, there are ways to, there's certain scalability and you can definitely get it, but starting the campaign with the limitation of, you only have one army and you have to do it slow, that's not how the game is played, and that's not going to change. Yes, I imagine the end game is going to get more interesting with the cataclysmic events and the Lords of the End Times, but the early game cannot be a tedious, boring piece of crap every time you start a campaign. This is the flaw for certain people. Like, people say, the early game should be slow. It's as slow or as fast as you make it out to be. And in no Total War game, regardless of how they did it, has the early game ever been forced on you to be slow. Like, even looking at Total War Attila, which was extremely punishing constant rebellions online, you could hold on to everything. I mean, there was even an achievement to win every single battle. You could do it as Western Rome. It was not fun to do so. So that's the question. Like, do they actually want to make the game interesting, or do they just want to make a grind? Because if they make another grind or keep the grind that we have, people aren't going to play Tomb Kings. And honestly, I can tell you one thing. As a content creator, as someone who follows statistics, trends, etc., Tomb Kings are one of the least played races in the game right now. And Creative Assembly should know this. They have the statistics. Like, it's something along those lines of what are the least played races in the game right now? Well, Demon Prince, of course, is the least. Then you go Tomb Kings, Vampire Coast. Yes, they're not that played by as many people. And yeah, you have Lizardmen to some degree on that. Some people like them. And of course, there are fan bases around this. But you cannot have this divergence of some races are amazing in the early game, some races are amazing in the entire campaign, and some races are really good in the late game. Having a race that's great only in the early game, it can be boring from the perspective of, like, yes, you just steamroll and nothing's interesting. Having a race like the Dwarves that's amazing throughout the entire campaign is what they should aim for every race. That's not about making every race the same. It's about respecting the players and respecting their time and understanding you cannot have a game where certain things are only good at certain points. The best way to design a game, and hopefully the lesson they learned with 40K, is to do that proper. That's something about pacing. And pacing is one of those things, because Cetra may have a faster construction time, and he even gains population surplus when he takes settlements. But the default construction time for Tomb King settlements is longer. Even basic barracks can take longer unless you're playing Cetra. So it's just this slow style, and it slows down even further with research and all that. And the problem is, you might think that adds some level of challenge. It does not. At all. The reason it does not is because eventually you just get units that you can recruit for free. Assuming I can select this army, for instance. Let's do that. You can recruit a large number of units every turn for free once you're certain settlements. You could just sit on your ass for 30 turns in your capital, and eventually you would have free armies, infinite number of skeletal spearmen, and as well as any kind of unit capacity you have. That's the problem with unit capacity. It doesn't work. I mean, I think Chaos Dwarves kind of, but again, it's that early limitation. But if you tie unit capacity to the idea of, oh, you got to construct certain structures, the reason it works for cast dwarves, it kind of, again, pacing issues, but cast dwarves could be just like, you know, Star War armaments, default unit capacity, and it would work much better. But Tomb Kings, it's all tied to structures. So that's the reason. Either you get obscenely powerful armies once you get a certain level of territory, and it's just spamming Tomb Guard and Nehakara warriors and all that, or you don't. And you still win, even with just 3 stacks of Skeletal Spearmen. So it's not really the best playstyle like Creative Assembly could have designed. On top of that, what's further frustrating is that, okay, so you get the scalability and, you know, getting army capacity is just like, oh, it doubles in terms of canonic jars, right? Okay, well enough. The thing that's annoying is, one, you have to spend some of those precious canonic jars to get bad regiments renowned. I mean, the only one that's kind of worth it are the Venom Knights of SF, but that requires you to get all kinds of resources. Now, you can do it through military, through trade, if you want to, or I think vassalization agreements can work. But yeah, there are ways of gaining it through trade, the vassalization. So I got Rapon. So for instance, she has iron. I don't have iron. She's given me that. So, you know, you could get Forek. But there's a bit of an issue there, because you also need them to actually trade with you, and they may also need to have that specific structure, I believe. Or maybe not. Maybe I'm wrong on that. But like, for instance, over here in Coffer, she doesn't have that. But she's not giving me spices because she doesn't, again, have the structure just yet. So if I want spices, well, better find a new source of spice. And that's the problem. If the AI builds the structures, you're fine. If it doesn't, you're messed up. So that's the problem with relying on even trade to get these resources, because what happens when the AI just doesn't build the structures, even though they have every capability of doing so? Like, for instance, there's not another source of spice over here for a while. There's not another source of obsidian for a while either. Like, there's this Karagorund, you could give it to Fork. The best thing you can do is probably just take over these elements and then trade them to these factions, but the reason I make this point is because Tomb Kings have a great deal of diplomatic capability with vassalization, diplomacy. A lot of factions are fairly neutral towards them to some degree. I mean, even Rapons only has -20 aversion against you because, you know, undead. So Tomb Kings can get along well with everyone, and the idea is you should make diplomacy work, but diplomacy kind of doesn't work. It doesn't work in Hakara because you need all of the terrain over here for those fucking pyramids. It doesn't work abroad because you need trade resources. It can work later on, but again, just those kind of issues in spacing. And don't even get me started on the whole research dynasties and heroes. I mean, heroes are really... The fact that the way they work is you research a dynasty, then you get one hero type over here on the side, and increases hero rank as well. You end up doing absurd stuff in your campaign, like recruiting higher level tomb princes later on, and higher and higher and higher. And it's also something to do with skill lines. For instance, Tomb Kings have a skill line right here where they have a choice between different gods, right? Well, let me tell you something about those different gods. Petra is the best one by far. Not only does he buff leadership, which is very important for your Tomb Guard, your mainline infantry, he buffs melee defense, and crucially, each of them gives you a hero recruit rank +2 for Tomb Princes faction-wide. Eventually, you get to a point in the campaign as the Tomb Kings where you don't even need armies. You just spam max rank fucking heroes, or at least Tomb Princes, and just demolish everything in your path. That is not good campaign design, and that is what Creative Assembly should have been improving on, updating. And the thing is, they did update skill lines. They did update the research tree. They did update the Confederation, but they did it in a bad way where they could have just tweaked the values more and vastly improved their campaigns. And of course, there would have been things to do further. Another thing that's irritating is the Books of Nagash. First off, the distance between you and the Books of Nagash is very far away. You don't need the books to win, but some of them give you much bigger benefits than others. Okay, what's the problem? Well, the fifth Book of Nagash and I think it was, what was it? So the fifth Book of Nagash is easily the best one by far because it gives you army capacity and +5 unit capacity for Tomb Guard and Tomb Guard with Chariot, so that's 10 units. There might be another one that I think, yeah, so you also get the 4th book of Nagash that gives you Lord Recruit rank, you get a research rate. Which one was the one I was looking at? Oh, yeah, the 1st book of Nagash. So 1st and 5th book are the best books by far. Everything else is pointless. The problem is, their location is randomized. So if you're playing a multiplayer campaign, well, enjoy sometimes having an infinite level of power, sometimes just being screwed over by the game very hard because of randomization. Randomization is fine, but not with something like this. It's like randomizing the locations of every single one of Malachi's adventures, every single campaign, and the location reward. So for instance, let's say you start a campaign once and the Thunder Barges are in the Castways, or let's say the Organ Guns are in the Castways as they regularly are, but what if sometime they're, I don't know, in the Badlands? It would be that bad. It's not how this system is supposed to work. And also the books are either in rogue armies, which are whatever, not interesting battles, or they're in specific settlements. You cannot even engage in diplomacy with these. Like, for instance, if someone takes Lamia, I have to go and conquer the fucking thing myself. Because Creative Assembly doesn't understand, again, their own game. You have a faction that's favoring diplomacy, but you cannot use diplomacy to achieve one of your biggest one of the most important successes you have in your campaign, which is getting the Books of Nagash. I mean, obviously I can use Confederation to get Khalida, if she still holds it, but what if someone else holds it? What if Forik takes it? That is the problem. And you can vassalize Forik very easily, but you can't gain the Book of Nagash from him. If you look at Cast Wars, when you're looking the realms, and I can't believe I'm going to use this example, but it is a better example. When you play Cast Wars in Realms of Chaos, you can actually get their artifacts that they need for their narrative campaign by diplomacy, military alliances with factions that hold certain settlements. Sure, there's some that you have to fight battles for, and etc., but you can also just gain some of those artifacts through alliances with factions that hold the territory. And Cast Dwarves are not a diplomatic-focused faction. Undead are, at least Vampire Counts and Tomb Kings. So this is where you start questioning, what is Creative Assembly doing? Best I can tell, I think they have an idea in their head of how the game should be played, and we see that constantly. We've seen it with the Lizardman rework, we've seen it with this Tomb King rework, we've seen it with all the Tides of Torment campaigns. Just because you think people should play your game in a certain way doesn't mean that they will. Look at how people actually play your game, look at the statistics, and they have those statistics, and then design the game based on that. Of course, it should be also noted that you should look at the underlying data closely, not just say, oh, people play campaigns this many turns. Ask yourself, how many turns are people active in a campaign? Where is the highest intensity of a campaign? Which types of campaigns do people gravitate the most? And all that. And that's what they should do to improve their game. Right now, it just feels like a developer has an idea, irrespective of how the game really ends up being played. Anyway, that's all I had to say. Yes, Tomb Kings need better, Books of Nagash. I swear, if there's no epic showdown with Cetra being really powerful, because he was, and Nagash, I think that would be disappointing. To understand something, one, Nagash invaded Nehekara in the end times with a massive army. He had the entire Vampire Coast army, he had a massive army of the Vampire Counts as well, and he had Archon. So he had a lot of resources, and he still did not want to fight Cetra directly, or he could have won, I guess, but what he did is he sneaked himself in, took over as God of the Underworld, and he just gained dominion over the Tomb Kings. That's what took to defeat Cetra. Right now, Cetra is nothing. He generally dies to a lot of different factions. I'm just saying, you want Cetra? Do him justice. Hell, do Khalida justice. There better be a clash between her and Neferata. Also, Archon and, yeah, Porkatep. That would be my perspective. Kostin signing out. Stay tuned for more.